The young man approached the officer's table without a word, his intentions a complete mystery. What he did next left the cop's wife sobbing, but not for the reason anyone expected. The clatter of silverware faded as the young man approached their table. Officer Cameron Tucker felt his wife's hand tighten around his, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a strained silence. He knew that look, a mixture of pride, fear, and the quiet strength she summoned every day he put on the uniform. It was just a typical Friday night family dinner at Copen's, or so it seemed. The scent of garlic and oregano, usually so comforting, hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the knot of anxiety tightening in Sarah Tucker's stomach. Copen's was their place. Exposed brick walls, adorned with vintage black and white photos of DeLand's history, created a warm, inviting atmosphere. Soft jazz played, a gentle counterpoint to the murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses. The lighting was low and intimate, casting long shadows that danced on the tablecloth. Tonight, though, the familiar comfort of the restaurant felt fragile, a thin veneer over the unspoken worries that always accompanied Cameron's profession. It was a refuge, yes, but even refuges could be breached. Cameron Tucker was a man built for service. His hands were calloused, not from office work, but from years of gripping steering wheels, holding weapons, and offering a steadying hand to those in need. His gaze was direct, unwavering, the kind that had seen too much, yet still held a flicker of hope. There were lines around his eyes, etched not just by age, but by sleepless nights and the weight of responsibility. He'd followed in his father's footsteps, drawn to the inherent need to protect, to serve, to be the thin blue line between order and chaos. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that every shift could be his last. And he knew Sarah knew it too. Sarah Tucker, normally the picture of vibrant energy, seemed smaller tonight, her delicate features etched with a worry that even the dim lighting couldn't hide. Her usually bright blue eyes, the color of a summer sky, were clouded with a lingering anxiety that had become a constant companion. She'd fallen in love with Cameron's gentle heart, his unwavering dedication, his quiet strength. But the reality of his job was a constant shadow, a cold whisper in the back of her mind. Every morning, she'd watch him walk out the door, a silent prayer escaping her lips, a prayer for his safety, for his return, for their life together to continue, uninterrupted. She tried to be strong, the unwavering support he needed, but the fear was always there, a relentless tide pulling at her. Tonight, it felt particularly strong. Their 2-year-old son, Leo, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, happily smashed a breadstick against his high chair, his chubby cheeks smeared with marinara sauce. His laughter, a pure, unadulterated sound, was a bright, innocent melody against the backdrop of their unspoken anxieties. He was the reason they both fought, Cameron on the streets, Sarah in her heart, for a safer, better world. He was their future, their hope, their everything. The young man who approached their table was a study in contrasts. He was tall and lean, with the defined muscles of an athlete, yet he moved with a hesitant grace. His clothes were casual, jeans and a clean t-shirt, but his demeanor was anything but. His eyes, a deep, thoughtful brown, held a depth of understanding that seemed far beyond his teenage years. He took a deep breath, his hands, Cameron noticed, slightly trembling as he neared their table. This wasn't a threat. Cameron's instincts, honed by years on the force, told him that. But it was unusual. "Excuse me, Officer Tucker," the young man said, his voice soft but firm, laced with a respect that instantly put Cameron at ease, even as a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "My name is Juan. I know this might seem a little strange, coming out of nowhere, but I was wondering if I could pray for you and your family." Cameron, initially stiff with surprise, felt a warmth spread through him. He glanced at Sarah, saw the tears welling in her eyes, tears not of sadness, but of something else entirely. Relief, perhaps? Understanding? He wasn't sure, but he knew, instinctively, that this was important. Sarah's hand, still gripping his, squeezed tighter, a silent affirmation. Juan placed his hand gently on Cameron's shoulder, the contact surprisingly grounding. The restaurant, with its clatter and chatter, seemed to fade into a distant hum. Cameron bowed his head, not out of obligation, but out of a sudden, overwhelming need for connection, for something bigger than himself, bigger than the fear, bigger than the daily grind of his job. He didn't hear all the words of Juan's prayer. He caught snippets, blessings for protection, for strength, for peace. But it was the feeling that resonated, the genuine care and compassion that flowed from this young stranger. It was a feeling of shared burden, of a weight being lifted, of a profound sense of being seen, of being understood. Sarah's tears flowed freely now, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sorrow, but tears of release, of gratitude, of a deep, abiding hope that had been rekindled by this unexpected act of kindness. The knot in her stomach loosened, replaced by a warmth that spread through her chest. After the prayer, a comfortable silence settled over them, broken only by Leo's happy gurgles. Cameron cleared his throat. "Thank you, Juan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. That meant a lot to us. More than you know." Sarah reached out and took Juan's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "It was incredibly kind of you," she said, her voice still trembling slightly. "What made you think of doing that?" Juan smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "My grandfather served in Vietnam, my great-grandfather in Korea," he explained. "And my dad was a police officer right here in DeLand. A corporal. He retired a few years ago." He paused, his gaze shifting to the floor for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. He saw a lot. It wasn't always easy on him or on us. My mom, she worried, just like you do. He looked back up at Sarah, his eyes filled with a deep empathy that transcended his age. "I remember one night, I must have been about 8 or 9. Dad came home late. His uniform was messed up. He didn't say much, but I could see it in his eyes, the weight of it all. My mom just held him, and I understood, even then. It wasn't just a job. It was everything." He took a deep breath. "That night, I started praying for him. Every night. And then I started praying for all the officers, for their families, for their safety. It's just something I do." He shrugged, a hint of self-consciousness creeping into his voice. "I'm hoping to join the academy after I finish up at Stetson. Studying business now, but I want to serve, to protect, just like my dad did." He added, almost as an afterthought, "My girlfriend, Maria, she understands. Her brother's a firefighter. We get it." Later that night, after Leo was tucked into bed, his soft snores filling the quiet house, Sarah sat on the edge of their bed, her phone in her hand. The image of Juan's hand on Cameron's shoulder, their heads bowed in prayer, was burned into her memory. It was a simple image, yet it held so much power, the power of connection, of empathy, of unexpected kindness. She opened her Facebook app, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had to share this, to let the world know that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, there was still good, still hope, still compassion. She uploaded the photo, the one she'd snapped almost without thinking, capturing that fleeting, sacred moment. Then, she began to type, the words flowing from her heart. "Tonight, at Copen's, a young man named Juan reminded me that we are not alone. He reminded me that there is still incredible kindness in the world, that there are people who care, who see the sacrifices our officers and their families make every single day." His simple, unexpected act of prayer brought tears to my eyes and filled my heart with a hope I hadn't realized I'd been missing. He shared that his father and grandfathers served, and that he hopes to join the force one day. He understands. And that understanding, that empathy, meant the world to us. Within hours, the post had exploded. Shares, comments, likes, it was spreading like wildfire. People from DeLand, from Florida, from across the country, were touched by Juan's story. "This is absolutely beautiful. We need more stories like this in the news. God bless this young man, and God bless all our officers and their families. Praying for their safety and protection. A powerful reminder that a little kindness can go such a long way. Thank you for sharing this. This restored my faith in humanity. What a wonderful young man. DeLand strong. We are so proud to have such compassionate young people in our community." The local news picked it up, then the regional news. Soon, Juan's simple act of kindness was making headlines, a small beacon of light in a world often dominated by darkness. For Cameron and Sarah, the experience was transformative. It strengthened the bond between them, a shared experience that reminded them of the support they had, not just from each other, but from their community. It renewed their faith, not just in a higher power, but in the inherent goodness of people. Juan, initially overwhelmed by the attention, became a reluctant local hero, a symbol of hope and compassion. He received messages of gratitude from officers and their families across the country, thanking him for his simple act of kindness. He continued his studies, his resolve to serve his community strengthened by the outpouring of support. And in DeLand, something shifted. A conversation had started, a spark of kindness had ignited. People were reminded of the power of empathy, of the importance of connection, of the simple act of reaching out to one another. A single act of kindness, born from understanding and compassion, had rippled outwards, touching countless lives and reminding everyone that even in the darkest of times, hope, like a whispered prayer, can always find its way.